Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming this afternoon. I would like to introduce a Boy Scout troop from Twin Falls County. They will present the colors of our great republic and the state of Idaho. Boy Scouts, please come forward.
Attention! Color guard forward march. Will the audience please rise? Salute. Color guard, halt. Post colors. Please follow me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. 2. Color guard reassemble. Color guard dismissed. Audience may be seated.
Okay, at this time I'd like to introduce Dr. Adrian Art from Filer, Idaho, and he will be presenting the invocation.
Would the audience please rise? Our eternal Heavenly Father, we're indeed thankful unto Thee for all Thy many blessings. We're thankful for this great republic of the United States of America and for the great Constitution which Thou brought forth through wise men brought up through Thy inspiration. We're thankful for the blessings of freedom that we enjoy, for the freedom today to be able to assemble as citizens in this great land of America. We are indeed thankful for all of those past and present that are now serving in our armed forces that have helped preserve this nation in freedom. We're thankful unto Thee, Heavenly Father, for all those that have taken the time to be here today. Bless them that we might, through their inspiration, come away with a renewed vigor to preserve the freedoms that we have. We ask Thy Spirit to be with us in this meeting this day, that we might be able to feel of Thy presence. We're thankful also for Thy Son especially and His atoning sacrifice, which gives us the opportunity to grow and to progress. We give thanks for all of those that have worked so hard throughout the years that lead our nation in freedom and righteousness. We pray that we have been complacent in our duties and pray that we might, through Thy inspiration, do better to uphold Thy Constitution. This day we're privileged to have a modern-day Noah come amongst us to tell us and to inform us. And we ask a special blessing to be upon Dr. Paul and all those who accompany him, that his message might resound a new birth of freedom in this area and throughout the nation. We pray for all these many blessings that we have and the blessings that we have to be here this day and that we might go away with a renewed sense of dedication to preserve freedom for future generations. We ask this in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Good morning again. I want to thank everyone for taking the time out of their schedules, including the teachers and the principals and the leaders of the college, to allow the students to be here tonight. But I want to talk to you shortly about our Twin Falls County Republican Caucus that's coming up on Tuesday, March 6th. And I want to ask everyone here, especially the young people, are you ready to change the course of history in this nation? If you want to do that, we've got to show up at this caucus Tuesday, March 6th. You need to be there to sign in at 6 p.m. and voting will start at 7 p.m. sharp. It will be at the Canyon Ridge High School. How many here are 17 years old? How many of you will turn 18 before November? If you haven't registered to vote, do it today at the end of this event, please. The Republican Party is going to allow you to vote in this caucus. You also have to declare you're a Republican. You can do that at the caucus, but you can do it early today to save from having to wait in long lines. So any of you registered voters, please fill out this form. It's something new. Myself and the other volunteers can explain why you have to do this. If you're not registered to vote, if you're a member of another party and you want to support our freedom movement, consider becoming a Republican just for this short time. I want to challenge you also to bring all your friends and your neighbors to this caucus. Let's rock out the vote. And lastly, it is very important that each and every person here, that whether you're from Twin Falls County or another county in the great state of Idaho, we have lists up there to sign up and become a voter's delegate to the county convention. These delegates will select state delegates that will go to the state convention that's going to be held here in Twin Falls. But please consider becoming a Ron Paul Republican delegate. Sign up out there. Okay, at this time, I would like to introduce Precinct Committee Woman Liz Nickum.
Deep honor to have Congressman and President candidate Ron Paul here today in Twin Falls. I am grateful for the opportunity to introduce to you this great man. He is extremely qualified to be our next president. He is a 12th-term congressman from Texas and has been a long-term leader in the fight to restore our constitutional republic. He's always kept his oath as a congressman to honor and protect the Constitution. Dr. Paul served during the Vietnam War as a flight surgeon. He's a physician who has delivered over 4,000 babies. He has been married to his lovely wife, Carol, for over 55 years, and they are the proud parents of 5 children and 18 grandchildren. He serves as chairman of the House Financial Service Subcommittee on Domestic Military Policy and is the author of 8 books. Congressman Paul is a highly respected expert on free market Austrian economics who correctly predicted the current economic crises we face because of his deep understanding of the business cycle and importance for sound currency. He's the only presidential candidate with a detailed plan to cut the federal budget by $1 trillion. The first year and have the budget balanced just like Idaho's in 3 years. As president, Dr. Paul would repeal Obamacare and work to allow the free market to help heal the ills of our current healthcare system. Congressman Paul is strongly pro-life and has always voted to protect our Second Amendment rights. He believes in a strong national defense. He opposes all foreign aid, including Israel's enemies.
no-win wars.
He wants the U.S. to follow the Christian principle of the Golden Rule. Treat other nations the way we would like to be treated. Dr. Paul is truly a champion of the Constitution who has the strength of character, and because of his deep integrity and fortitude against Washington corruption, stands alone as a genuine citizen statesman. Dr. Paul is a great example of a modern-day patriot who, like our founding fathers, courageously speaks out against government tyranny, which threatens our God-given rights. And he is helping to ignite the fires of freedom in many, many Americans across this nation. So it's time for us to support Dr. Ron Paul and the Constitution, that our families in this great nation can continue to be blessed with liberty. Will you help me welcome the next President of the United States, Congressman Ron Paul?
Thank you for that very nice welcome. Sounds like a lot of friends here today. I want to introduce my wife of 55 years, Carol, sitting over here. And one of our 18 grandchildren, Linda. Appreciate very much you coming out. There wasn't much notice that I would be coming through, but I'm delighted to see so many and so much enthusiasm, because there's some very important things going on in the world. All elections are important, and sometimes every election is the most important in history. Well, I don't usually say that, but I do think there are economic and political things going on right now, whether they will be solved or improved or what will happen with the election, but I do know there's a lot of big issues coming together. In the past, I used to talk a lot about, we can't spend all this money because all we do then is we pass the debt on to the next generation. And some people still say that, and there's some truth to it, but I've quit saying it and quit emphasizing it because I think we're the next generation. I think we have to face our problems. We're paying for this debt. That's why the economy's in a very weak state, and why the wars keep going on and our civil liberties are being violated. So we have to address that. It's this generation, it's our time, and that is why it's so important. But the magnificent thing to me about what's happening in the country to address these problems is not so much, matter of fact, what's happening in Washington is in many ways irrelevant because they're not doing the right things, they're doing the wrong things. But where the really great things that are happening are outside of Washington. The people are waking up and they're sick and tired of what we're getting. But when the people wake up, Washington will eventually change. For the many, many decades, Washington has done, they have just essentially reflected what the people wanted. The people, fully endorsed all the wars. They fully endorsed the Federal Reserve. They fully endorsed the entitlement system, believing it could go on forever and ever. But it's come to an end. The entitlement system is bankrupt. Matter of fact, what we have to challenge basically in the entitlement system is challenge the notion that an entitlement, as the word is used now, is not a right. People aren't entitled to somebody else's property. That's what... But I'll tell you what we are entitled to, and this is what we have to emphasize. The fact that our lives come from our Creator. We are entitled to our lives, and we are entitled to our liberties, and we are to be responsible for our lives. But under those circumstances, if it is our life and if it is our liberty, we ought to have the ability and the right to keep the fruits of our labor. So this is what's happened over the many years, our really shift in attitude about defending the republic and shifting into a pure democracy. It's been over 100 years or so that this has been going on. And we've accepted these notions that we should have an income tax back in 1913. And it was guaranteed that if you have an income tax, they're going to collect a lot of taxes, and what will happen? Government will grow. And that's why the founders didn't give us an income tax. So when the republic comes back, we won't have an income tax anymore. Of course, when the republic comes back and we respect our Constitution, we will have sound money. We will have a gold and silver standard as is in the Constitution. We will not have bills of credit, and we won't have a Federal Reserve System. The basic flaw in the income tax, and in many ways with the Federal Reserve, the assumption is made that the government owns us and they own all the fruits of our labor, and we're allowed to keep that portion that they permit us to keep under certain circumstances. And this is a bad assumption because, therefore, we give up our right to our life. We should be able to own our lives, but we have to be responsible with that life. We have to assume responsibility. If we mess up, we're supposed to assume those responsibilities. If we do well, we ought to be rewarded. That's what freedom is all about, and I think we've lost that, and that has to be renewed if we expect to once again have a society that is based on peace and prosperity. But it's the lack of respect for the rule of law and the lack of respect for the Constitution that has really gotten us into this mess. And we were warned. It isn't like this is a new idea. We were warned by those who wrote the Constitution. They said, be very careful, because if we are not a moral people and we choose to disobey the law, no matter how well the Constitution might be written, it won't work. And I think the Constitution had some flaws, obviously. So therefore, the Constitution was deeply flawed, and we failed to follow it. And that is why we're into this condition right today. For instance, we mentioned the tax issue. That was not part of the original Constitution. Then we had the banking problems that we've gotten because we have a Federal Reserve System. But just think about how we go to war. How much power have we given to the president? I want to be president. But I don't want to be president to run your life. I don't think I don't want to be president because I think I know how to run the economy. Only the people know how to run the economy, and they're the ones who know how to spend their money. And also, a president who's a truly constitutional president would never embark on a war without explicit permission from the Congress and the people with the declaration of war. If we have an enemy, we declare the war, fight it, and get it over with, and come home. But sadly, our presidents in recent decades have gone to war. Matter of fact, essentially since World War II, they have gone to war on their own. They do not get explicit declarations of war. But worse than that, lately, they don't even mention it. They don't even debate it. They don't even go to the Congress. They go to places like United Nations and NATO and get the authority. So they have undermined our national security. We are not we are not a stronger nation. We do not have stronger national security, strong national defense by belonging to these organizations that dictate to us what we do in international affairs. That should be the business of the American people and the American government, not the United Nations. We have now gotten ourselves involved in maintaining an empire. Some people resent the fact that we will call it an empire. But what is it if we're in 138 countries with military bases? What is it when we have, the number of bases are growing so rapidly we can't keep up with it. I used to say 700, 800, then it was 800 to 900. Some people now list that we have military facilities in maybe 1,000 places in the world. And of course, the hottest spot in the world today is the Middle East. And the other day, some of you may have seen this on the internet, they had a map of Iran. Iran, is supposed to attack us pretty soon if we're not careful. Well, they had a map of Iran, and we had 48 bases surrounding Iran, and then they say that we better be ready. That is exactly what they said to us when they wanted us to go into Iraq. There were no threats by Iraq. They ginned that up, and then they said they're illegal. Since we've been fighting over there these past 11 years, over 8,000 Americans have died. We have spent trillions of dollars. Our national debt is up $4 trillion because of the foreign expenditures in that region. And it's not ending. The proposals, and every once in a while you say, well, we're going to cut back on such and such from the military-industrial budget. But they aren't cuts. They're just cuts on these wild proposed automatically increases over the next decade. So right now, there's nobody in Washington, no other candidates that's advocating real cuts to the budget. And across the board, I say that we should cut $1 trillion out of the budget in 1 year. For those who say, well, wouldn't that weaken the economy? If the government's not spending that money, wouldn't that weaken the economy? No, it does exactly the opposite. When government takes money from the people, and then that means the people don't have it to spend, then they spend it, and they usually do harm with the money. How often do they do things very productive? They take productive resources, put them in the government, then they might write regulations and have bureaucrats come in and take over education, take over medicine, and do all these inefficient things. So it actually is a strong negative when they do that. Now, if you could return $1 trillion to the people and let the people make the decision, then we could have economic growth. When you don't have economic growth, or you try to repair the problems that have come about because of the Federal Reserve and the tax system and the regulatory system, when they take it over, they actually make things that much worse. But what else happens? When there's easy credit system and this system of money that's designed in secret by the Federal Reserve, guess who benefits from the bubbles? There's the rich people on Wall Street and the people who run the mortgages, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and the military-industrial complex, the politicians. They all benefit by this creation of new money. And then when the crisis comes, they say, oh, there's a depression coming, a depression is coming. So we have to bail out the people who are suffering. But what did they do? The Federal Reserve bailed out Goldman Sachs and the other banks and the military-industrial complex. And then the whole pretense of why we have the entitlement system, everybody a house, give everybody a free education and free medical care. Guess what happened to the middle class? The debt was dumped on the middle class. The debt was bought by the Federal Reserve, put into the Federal Reserve and into our Treasury. So the debt is on our heads now. And this time, what happens to those that were supposedly this system's supposed to help? Give those free things to help people who might fall through the crack. They're the ones who lost their jobs. They're the ones who lost their houses. The middle class is shrinking. The middle class is poor. The characteristic of a free and prosperous society, which we had the freest and most prosperous society at one time. And at that time, we had the largest middle class and the wealthiest middle class ever. And that is not true. Even the wealth that you can see around the country today is based on debt. that we're in much worse shape than we were in the Depression, because there wasn't anything of the problems that we have internationally. We didn't owe foreigners $3 trillion. I mean, we're in hock close to $1 trillion just to the Chinese. So our conditions are much worse, and they're depending on one thing: print more money. Bernanke's over in Europe telling them all the time, if you can't handle your crisis, we stand ready. We stand ready to come to the rescue the banks that bought up all this Greek debt. And because our banks are intertwined with their banks, he says we have to prop them up and we have to bail them out at your expense. And that is what's wrong with it. It's wrong because it's a badly flawed financial system, a monetary system, and it's a badly flawed economic system that we have, where the government does nothing more than pass laws to try transferring wealth back and forth. We have to once again understand how free markets work, how sound money works, how limited taxations work, and limited amount of regulation. This is where the prosperity comes from. Will it be perfectly equal? No, it won't be. They're working on equality of poverty. That, I say, we should have no part of. We want our freedom back. Somewhere along the way, we lost the notion that only Congress was supposed to write the laws. Who writes the laws today? Supreme Court gets involved, the courts get involved, they make rulings. Do they just rule constitutional or not? No, they get in the business of writing laws in their declarations. It is only Congress that's supposed to write laws. What about what's happening today? The executive branch writes regulations. Regulations are law. Nobody can even read them. They're so complicated. No one person understands even the tax code. And yet they continue to do this. It's written by the executive branch of government, and technically they're not constitutional. What have we allowed our presidents to do? Oh, if they have a bill they want to sign into law, they say, well, some of it I don't like, so I'm going to have a signing statement. I'm going to sign, I don't like this part, I'm not going to follow that part. Signing statements aren't part of the Constitution. What about executive orders? Some executive orders technically could be constitutional, very rarely when it's related to the military or operating a war. But for them to write executive orders to get around the Congress, like this current president has done recently, he says, well, Congress won't pass these environmental laws, I want to do it on my own. He writes his own laws. That is not proper under our Constitution. Only the Congress should write the laws. This whole system that we have is detrimental, not only because it bankrupts our country and our economy gets poorer, but it also undermines the very essence of what we're supposed to be all about. It undermines the principles of liberty. The Constitution was written, and the purpose of government, from my viewpoint, should be to protect liberty. That is what the government should be doing. But that is the one area that they're not dealing with. Just think about privacy. Do we really have privacy in this country anymore? Do we have Fourth Amendment rights? No. I was pretty annoyed, when they passed the Patriot Act, and I voted against it because it was very But when I talked to another member of Congress why he was voting for it, I said, you didn't even have time to read it. It's only been on the floor for an hour. He said, oh, I know. I said, there's going to be some bad things in there. He said, oh, yeah, I know. I said, well, why are you voting for it? He says, well, under these emergency conditions, how can I vote against the Patriot Act? And he says, how would I explain this if I had to go back to my district? I said, well, that's your job. Go back home and explain your vote to your district. Now, if they would have given that bill a proper name, like repeal the Fourth Amendment Act, guess what? It probably wouldn't have passed. But you can be pretty assured that if you look at the title of the bill coming out of Congress, the name is going to do the opposite of what it's really going to do. They make it sound good. But that bill had been around for a long time, the Patriot Act. It had been floating around for years. But once again, there was this opportunity, to pass it, and they saw the crisis and the justifiable concern after 9/11. So we got a bill passed which has undermined our liberty. Now the government undermines our privacy, and the government gets more secret. We need to turn that around. We need more openness of government and more privacy of the people. 9/11 was actually used for the excuse to go into Iraq. Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. There was no Al-Qaeda there. And they had made plans for years and years to go in there and have regime change. Matter of fact, the first speech I gave on the House floor about opposing the coming war in Iraq was in 1998, because that is when the policy was explicitly changed. And it took them a few years to get the environment and the opportunity. There were meetings shortly after 9/11 saying, this is an opportunity to do what we've been wanting to do. So what did they do? They forgot about bin Laden for 10 years. And they went off and started these wars of occupation, spending trillions of dollars and loss of life. This is the problem. The money's a big deal, and the economy is a big deal. But just think of the families who lost people over there. In a war, it was not declared, it was not a constitutional war. And we're all supposed to say, well, this is a wonderful, wonderful thing. But 8,500, when you count the contractors, died. There are 44,000 who've come back with severe injuries, many with amputations, and hundreds of thousands begging for help from the Veterans Administration with post-traumatic stress syndrome and brain injuries. And the cost is too high. It makes no sense whatsoever. It undermines our defense and it destroys our economy. This is why we need, as a people, to stand up and say, no more of these wars. Only constitutional wars should be fought. But under these atmosphere, whether it's the Patriot Act or whether they're going to war, other things continue to happen, because it's this attitude that we're in a crisis and there's an expectation that, well, under a crisis, don't we have to give up some of our liberties? Absolutely not. Matter of fact, that is a fallacy. We should never, ever consider sacrificing liberty for more security, because you lose both. But not only do we have the Patriot Act, we've had a few other things going on. A year ago, the president announced that under certain circumstances, he, the president, had the authority to assassinate American citizens. And to prove his point, he did it. He did it on 3 occasions. One of them was a 16-year-old boy barbecuing in his backyard. But this attitude that we can live with outside the law is very, very dangerous. Now, the Congress has participated in this, and the President signed into law on January 1st the National Defense Authorization Act. And of course, most people have heard, not from the media on the news at night to find out what was actually buried in there, but most people do know now that in that bill, the Congress gave the President the authority to suspend or cancel out posse comitatus, which means the military is not supposed to be involved in civil law. Now the military can arrest an American citizen if he's a suspect, if he's just associated with another group of people, maybe going to the internet, maybe getting an email, maybe attending an anti-war meeting. Who knows what associated forces mean. But they can be arrested by the military, held in secret, no attorneys permitted, and this is written in the law, no attorneys permitted to have them and be kept indefinitely. This is not being done wholesale. But if we want to stop it, we better stop it now, not when they do it in a wholesale manner. There's another area that our personal privacy and personal affairs have been invaded unconstitutionally, and it has to do with the federal war on drugs. Now, the drug issue is a very important issue. As a physician, as a congressman, I've thought this through, and I have come to the conclusion drugs are very, very bad. We should do whatever we can, except that the federal war on drugs has caused a lot more harm than the drugs themselves have. You know, this whole notion about regulating everything that we put into our mouths or into our body doesn't make any sense, because in a free society we have generally recognized that we can deal with our hereafter and our eternity and what we do with our religious values. We can practice whatever religion we want, and some days there are some who would like to cancel that out, but at least we have that, and we allow people to ignore it if they don't want to. And basically, intellectually, these are important issues. You know, a person's hereafter, and intellectually, ideas have consequences, but we don't ban books. We don't ban the study of socialism and communism in our university. It's there because we have to defeat them with a better idea. But for some reason, we as a people now, for at least 40 years, when the war on drugs has gotten out of control, they assume that the government can regulate everything that we put into our mouth, every single thing, and there's always some ulterior motives behind that. But the worst part is the people who come and say they might have drugs, and you know, they have these SWAT teams, they march in, wrong buildings, wrong houses, wrong apartment, and kill people by mistake. So it would be settled by not having a federal war on drug. It would be settled by this Constitution. How about this whole idea that nobody comes barging into our house unless they have a search warrant? That would be a pretty But then people get nervous and they say, well, how are we going to have safety at our airport? Don't the TSA provide a lot of safety for us at the airport? I mean, we have to take x-rays of individuals, and we have to undress elderly people and little children and poke and prod, and nobody has shown where it has made anybody safer. And so we have to recommit ourselves to believing what a free country is all about. The one thing I've concluded is that if I had a choice to live in a free society and I would have less wealth, I would opt for living in a free society with less wealth. But the wonderful thing about a free society is you always have more wealth and more people benefit by the wealth. That's what's so wonderful about it. I'm always amazed looking back on why all of us who have tried to promote these ideas haven't done a better job, because, if freedom, recognizes the individual's personal rights and their personal habits, and it recognizes the free market, creates more prosperity, and all these wonderful things, and actually following the law, you have less wars. How can we lose this argument? But we did get awfully careless. I think what happened was we as a society became so wealthy and so prosperous from these freedoms that we thought only about the material things in life. And then we started using the government to redistribute this wealth, so the lobbyists became more powerful than the defenders of liberty. We need to reverse that. We need more defenders of liberty and less lobbyists in Washington. But we certainly have an opportunity right now. As bad as things are, I'm actually very encouraged about what's happening in the country. I've been talking about these issues for a long time. I first went to Congress in the 70s, went back to my medical practice because I didn't want to spend my life being in Washington all the time. So I went back and practiced medicine for about 12 years. But things have changed dramatically. The openness to these viewpoints now is just phenomenal compared to even 5 years ago. Something thank you for that offer of compliment, but a little bit I had to do with it. But the people that really is important are ideas. Ideas have consequences, and these ideas have been around. There has been a remnant in society. There's always a remnant in society that clings to the truth of things, whether they're economic or religious truth. So we have always had a remnant, but they have been very, very quiet because they've been so outnumbered, and there was still so much prosperity. Because it's recognized now that we're in bigger trouble, that remnant is once again coming alive. And I think about in my lifetime of an example of the true remnant was how Solzhenitsyn survived under the Soviets. He was born when the Soviet Revolution occurred, and yet by the time that the Soviet system came apart, we found out about Solzhenitsyn. Even though he had been in prison, he spoke fluent English, read all the classics, was a religious person, in spite of the total tyranny of the Soviet system. So there is always that remnant, and that remnant has been here, and as the Bible says, you don't know who they are, where they are, and you don't know how many. All I know, there's been plenty, and I'm delighted to meet them, but we have something that's complementing the remnant right now, and that is the youth movement. The young people. I'm always pleased when I'm out campaigning and shaking hands and people will come up and get signatures, and sometimes they'll have one of my brochures or something, but other times somebody will come up and say, would you sign Human Action by Mises, and economic textbooks. I tell you, this is exciting. Young people come to my office, even teenagers, the ones that can't even vote, they've already started studying about the Federal Reserve System and the principles of money and the Constitution. This is fantastic. And of course, the message doesn't get spread by the ordinary network, not the ordinary network of the media, ordinary politicians, ordinary universities. It doesn't get there. It goes by either word of mouth or today through the internet. But what is the government trying to do with the internet? They're trying to take over the internet, which we have to stop them from doing. But this is the internet, the Stop Online Piracy Act, that was stopped. It was taken off the floor in the House and the Senate because of what you did, because you let people know, and people who had signed up because, it looks like a popular thing to do, I'll put my name on this. And the people rose up and the Congress backed down. But that doesn't mean they won't keep trying. But it tells you that if the people speak out, if attitudes change, if you get sick and tired of the wars and sick and tired of the Fed and sick and tired of the debt, and you speak out and send only people there that you can trust that will obey their oath of office, we can change things around. And that's where we are winning. To live in a free society, it is not really complicated. There are always problems in society, and we always want to have changes. And it's when government uses force to bring about the changes, whether economic or social. There's always social problems and personal behavior problems. But if people aren't hurting or killing or stealing from each other, if it's just personal habits, those habits are up to the individual or maybe parents. But assuming that the government is going to come in and mold our behavior and mold and control the economy, that's when we get into trouble, because for the government to do that, they have to use force to do it. And I believe that if you want to change society, if you want to change individual behavior, if you want to change the economy, or if you want to change the behavior of people in foreign countries who have less than perfect governments like we do, you can't do it with force. You can't do it with threats. You can't do it with intimidations. You can't do it with weapons. And you can't do it with invasions. There are some who believe, and this notion's been around a long time, that America is an exceptional nation, and because we are so exceptional, so good, we have this obligation to force ourselves on other people. Well, I believe in half of that. I think we've had exceptional values and still have a lot. But the best way to spread that message, whether it's to your children or to your neighbors or through your church, it should be voluntary. But if we want to change the world for the better, the best thing we could do is set a good example. Why don't we have if we had a truly free and prosperous society, maybe somebody would want to emulate us, and want to be like us. But it doesn't work the other way. And so unfortunately, though, we have been making the use of force too often, and I think it has backfired on us. It hurts ourselves, and we still have a long way to go. Improving ourselves here at home, and that should be our goal, just as it is in our personal life. I think freedom means that you have an obligation to pursue your own life. And for me, it's to seek virtue and excellence. What else should we be doing if we don't want to improve ourselves individually? But if we turn that responsibility of seeking virtue and excellence, or economic fairness, if we turn that over to the government, the only thing the government can do is take away our liberties in there. They have to use force to do that. So we once again have to have the understanding. It means we do have to understand economic policy. So we have to understand why sound money is important, and why, the entitlement system. The entitlement system was set up to help poor people. Everybody wants to make sure there are fewer poor. But I tell you what, if you're a true humanitarian, you want to help poor people, you want to fight for more freedom, not more government. They don't take care of the poor people. But the entitlement system is set up to help the poor, but who gets the entitlements? Usually the special interest and the wealthy, and they throw crumbs to the poor if they even get the crumbs after the thing comes down on their heads. So it is an intellectual fight. It's political. I'm involved in both. But I do believe changing people's minds and hearts are very, very important. But then the politics will change as well. And that is why all of us are involved. If you agree with what I'm saying, and you've heard this maybe the first time or second or third and say, that's right, then you're going to be one of the few, because most people don't care that much. Most people, even the ones that vote, sometimes they decide to vote the day before, what I'm going to do, who's going to vote for, and that's the way it's going to be. But if you come to the conclusion that some of these principles are right, and you feel a burden about doing it, you have more obligation than the people who don't care, who don't understand it and never will. So that means, well, what can you do about it? A lot of people come to me, what should I do? I agree, you've convinced me. So what do I do? Give me my marching orders. I said, do what you want to do. Do what you have to do. You might want to be a teacher. You might want to be a reporter. You might want to be a writer. You might run for office and help people. There's all kinds of things that you do. But the most important thing is be informed. If a person is informed and truly believes in liberty and can defend those causes, there will always be a job. There will always be something to do. And you might know when or where it's coming, but the most important thing is just be prepared to be able to defend these principles. Too often, how often do we get accused, we don't care. We don't care about the poor people. I've had it done to me on national television. You don't care, you just believe in freedom. Oh, you mean you believe in free markets? No regulations, let the big guys run roughshod out of us? No, I want a free society where the rough guys are held down, because the ones who deserve bankruptcy should go bankrupt. In closing, I want to just talk a minute or two about why I think freedom is so wonderful. Because the basic concept of freedom recognizes individual liberty and individual rights. But the magnificent thing is, not only does it produce prosperity, but I believe it brings people together. Because everybody want to use their freedom in a different way. And if you agree just not to abuse the rights of others, a lot of people like their own rights, but they want to abuse other people's rights. You have to reject telling other people what they have to do with their life. And if you can do that, it brings people together. So you should have great diversity. And we have great diversity in our campaign. People come together, but for different reasons. They might, want it for one reason, somebody else for another reason. But the principle of liberty is what brings us together. So the lifestyle doesn't bring us together. Matter of fact, I don't even like hyphenated rights or groups. I don't think anybody has a right because of of sex or sexual orientation or race. I don't like that. You have your rights and they should be equal, and everybody should have them and know they're abused because you're an individual. So there is a revolution going on, and it's participating in this campaign. Exactly what will happen today, next week, next month, next year, or November, I don't know, but I do know there's a lot of big things going on, and I know it's very fluid. It can change any day, any minute. The financial system is just very, very shaky. The world political system is very shaky. I mean, to me, it's almost like an obsession. When are we going to send the troops to Syria? When are we going to take over Syria? And when are we going to start bombing Iran? I mean, so this can cause a great deal of trouble. So we're sitting on a time bomb, but we also have a solution sitting out there where the numbers of people who are understanding and growing and willing to be involved are growing by leaps and bounds. And we have to confront them. If the only way you can confront those individuals in charge who have the bad ideas is to present our cause with a much better idea, and that is the ideas of liberty which made America great. Thank you very much.
I've heard we have a couple high schools here, and we wanted to thank the high school that's hosting this right now and open it up for some student questions. So if you're a high school student from one of the local high schools, just raise your hand. I'll bring the mic down to you. You can ask we have time for just 2 questions.
Thank you, Rob.
Okay.
So, I think all of us agree about what you're saying, but do you have any information you can give us about how you're going to get it done?
That's a good question. He sort of agrees with what I'm saying. How am I going to get it done? I can't get it done without you. It's the people that bring about the changes. But I think a critical question is, how do you get it done? You're elected president. And how do you get to Congress to do these things, and how do you accomplish? A president has a lot of authority, the illegal authority going into wars. The president has the legal authority to get out of the wars. I can bring the troops home right away. And all the executive orders, matter of fact, we went off the gold standard with an executive order. But that's more complicated. But just getting people behind the right ideas of maybe having competition in currencies to legalize gold and silver once again. But what we need to do, though, is that the Congress will be better. If there's a consensus to elect a freedom-loving president, that means the consensus will be reflected in the Congress. And I'll let you in on a secret. There's a lot of people in Washington that aren't all that principled. They're just listening here to their ear. So if the pressure's on them, just like the pressure was on them to change their vote on Stop Online Piracy Act, they changed. So that is what has to happen. But that means people like you have to do it, and an individual like myself get elected. And then it won't be easy. There's no doubt about it. But the whole problem is if we let this thing go and it collapses, somebody's going to come along on a white horse and say, the problem is we don't have enough government. That's what we have to stop. Let's see if we get another one.
What kind of time frame are you looking for bringing our troops back home?
What's the timetable?
What's the timetable for bringing the troops home? To make my point, I usually answer by saying, as soon as I get the ships there. Just bring them home. it makes no sense if it's going badly and we shouldn't have been there. Some people say we should stay to save face because it's an embarrassment. Well, how many more men and women have to die to save face because they went in there wrongly? We don't need anyone. We have another one up here.
All right, my generation's youth is being sent away, and I want to know what you're going to do to stop this from happening and fix it so we don't have to pay for the mistakes our parents have made.
Well, we have to stop the bleeding, the economic bleeding, this spending. And that's why, in order to do that and minimize the burden, that is the reason, so far, I'm the only one that offered any cuts, $1 trillion cut. That's to make sure that you don't have to keep adding more and more payment. Another thing that I have advised, even with all my cuts, I did not, in that proposal, even though we do need reforms on the Social Security and Medicare, even that $1 trillion cut, I don't cut Medicare or Medicaid. But I also offer in that, if you're under 25 and you're going out in the workforce and you want to take care of yourself and stay out of Social Security, I'd let you get out. I'd let you opt out.
We have time for one more question.
Okay, on your plan to restore America under cutting government waste, it states makes a 10% reduction in the federal workforce. There's a couple points I would like to clarify. First, how is cutting American jobs helpful? Second, how is American jobs considered a government waste? And finally, what part of the federal workforce would be cut?
Well, most of the cuts that I propose are through attrition, as just not rehires, so it's not like overnight. But one part of history that you might review so you're not frightened about cuts, like let's say I could or propose that the people would accept cutting 1 million jobs or something like this. But go to World War II and look at what happened after World War II. And there were 10 million military people came home, and people worried about what you're talking about. And they said, oh, the depression will come back, the depression will come back. We have to have work programs, we have to take care of everybody. And lo and behold, 10 million people came back, and they reduced spending by 60%, and they reduced taxes by 30%, and we finally got out of the depression because the people started spending the money. So there's a big difference. There's a big difference if you pay a salary of $100,000 to somebody to be a bureaucrat to come down here and tell you how you can use your land and get permit and obstruct. That's a negative. You give $100,000 to an individual producing goods and services, that's productive. So it's a $200,000 difference. One's productive, one's destructive. Thank you very much.
Thank you for taking the time to do that.
Thank you, sir.